Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and I want to take a look at President Donald Trump's official portrait that the White House recently put out. I want to go ahead and analyze it, look at how it was shot, what it was shot with, and give you some input on what I think about the portrait, as well as take a look at George W. Bush's two portraits and Barack Obama's two portraits and put it up against this one. So here we have it. This is the official portrait that will live on throughout history as long as history is there. Now, this isn't meant to be a politicized post at all. We're looking at this from a photographer's standpoint and analyzing the image. In terms of the portrait itself, I think it's conveying the message that they want to convey. I'm tough, I'm stern, but you don't know what I'm going to do. That's just the nature of the portrait. You've got the flag in the background, and you have what looks to be the White House, but from what it looks like it's composited. And we'll get to the settings in just a second to justify why I think it's composited, but it just looks composited. So let's go back to the first one here on the left with George W. Bush. This is shot with film. It's nice and sharp. It's lit the way that it's lit from the 90s, actually 2000s, sorry, he came in 2000, and it looks perfectly fine. Nice and sharp. It conveys the message. He's always smiling because that's what George W. Bush did. And I want to point out the pin right here. The pin is sharp, as well as he is sharp. Now we move over to Barack Obama's image. This is the first official White House portrait, or the first official presidential portrait taken with a DSLR. It was taken with a Canon 5D Mark II, shot at 1/125th of a second, ISO 100 at f10 with the 105 millimeter. So look how sharp this photo is, and look how sharp the pin is. Now, I don't think this is the greatest portrait in the history of the world at all, but of course it's iconic because it's a presidential portrait. So that becomes an iconic image, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It is what it is, and that's not the problem. Now, if you notice this, you might say, is there too much headroom? Now, I would assume that Pete Souza shot this knowing that it would be printed as an 8x10 in most places, because if we look at the other four on here, they are already cropped to 8x10. So if we went up here to crop and we went to 8x10, you would see what would happen right there. It would give you the 8x10 aspect ratio, and you could crop it any which way that you wanted to go ahead and do that. Moving on to the second presidential portrait, this is a much happier look. I still don't think it's lit the best way, but it's great. It's in the Oval Office. He's smiling. It conveys that message of welcoming. Done with the Canon EOS 5D Mark III with the 85 millimeter 1.2, which is a fantastic lens for portraits. ISO 200 this time. You can see that everything is straight up sharp from top to bottom, except for obviously the background right there. Now moving on back to President Donald Trump's portrait, you can see this was taken at 1/320, hey, get out of here, 1/320th of a second at f2.8 ISO 640, but with the Canon EOS 1DS Mark III. That is a 10-year-old camera. Keep in mind, this is a 10-year-old camera. Now, I will always say that it doesn't matter what you shoot pictures with. You should be able to get fantastic results with anything. But when you're photographing the President of the United States, you would think that they would be using at least a 5D Mark IV, if not a 1DX Mark II, as well as with the latest 70-200 2.8 version 2, or the 85 1.2, which would give a great portrait shot. Now, we don't know the situation. We don't even know at the time of recording this who the photographer was officially that shot this. I think the portrait is fine from the standpoint of the portrait aspect of it and what they were trying to convey. But the use of the old camera that's 10 years old and shooting it at 640 ISO, that camera maxed out at 1600 ISO. You're at places where it's not going to look too good because that camera 10 years ago was great, but now it doesn't compare with even some of the lower end entry-level cameras that are out on the market. So let's break this down. One of the things that I noticed first was that the pin wasn't sharp. Now, of course, in terms of a portrait, the point is to draw you into the subject because it's a portrait of this person. So maybe that's meant to just draw you right into him. The other thing is, I don't think it's sharp. The eye, I mean, yes, you could make an argument that this eye is sharp, but why is it shot at 2.8? You have to ask that question. Is it shot at 2.8 for the effect that they just want to isolate his face? Or is it because he's 70 years old, he's 20 some, what, Barack is what? Yeah, he's 20 years older or so compared to when George W. and Barack also came into office. So he's a little older, he has a little more wear and tear on the face, so maybe shooting at 2.8 would soften that up, but also so would 3.2 and all of that. But just the fact that it was shot with a 10-year-old camera at 640 ISO when it maxed out at 1600, to me, is a problem. Now, to everybody else out there in the world that's not a photographer, they don't care. The picture does what it's supposed to do. But it does look like they went to Sears, Roebuck and Company and got a portrait there and said, hey, what backdrop would you like to get? Well, I'd like the American flag in the background, and then I would like you to put the White House back there. The reason I think that it's a composite is because if it was taken outside at this time, if it was taken outside, it would have been taken during the day, and you wouldn't have needed to be at 640 at 1/320th of a second at 2.8. It would have been shot at f8 or something along those lines because it would have been awfully bright at 640 ISO. So you want to keep that in mind with why I'm saying that it looks like a composite. What do you guys think? Do you think it's a composite? Did they just drop the photo where it is and make this, drop the background in there? So that's really what I think about it. I think the photo is fine the way that it is. It's not the greatest portrait. It's not the worst portrait. It does what it's trying to do. But I just don't understand using a 10-year-old camera, a 70-200 version 1, and shooting at 640 ISO when the max on that bad boy is 1600. It just looks like it was taken with, I mean, I don't think there's a flash. It's like, what did they light this with? A phone or something along those lines? I also think it's too blue, right? Too blue. Warm it up a little bit, even though that's a little not too far, but whatever. That's beside the point. So that's what I think about the photos. I don't think any of them are tremendously the greatest portraits. I love candids. I think this portrait's fine, but I don't understand most of it for all the reasons that I explained. So I'd love to hear what you guys think about this portrait. Is it a composite? Do you think it matters what it was shot with? I personally think it should have been shot with something better in this day and age, but this is the photo. You can't complain about that. It is the photo that's out there in the world, and congratulations to whoever took it because they have an official portrait of a president for his presidency. So we'll leave it at that. Let me know what you think. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.
Subscribe now. Watch this video.